Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Soul Food. Thank you for all the people out there in Cyberland who show up month in and month out. You are appreciated, whoever you are. We pretty consistently reach about 35 to 60,000 people a month on YouTube. And so I appreciate all of you folks for showing up. There are lighter and fluffier astrology reports, and there are certainly many other really good ones. But in order to watch or listen to mine, there really is sometimes you need to pay attention because it's not necessarily, hopefully there's some fluff, but it's not necessarily all fluff. A couple of things before we get started, very, very quickly, very, very simply. I just want to announce that next Thursday night, that's a week from tomorrow for those of you who are here in real time. I don't know what time everyone else is in, but Thursday, June 8th, I will be doing a lecture for the Fraser Valley Astrology Guild in Vancouver, British Columbia, called Everything You Ever Wanted to Know About Uranus But Were Afraid to Ask. And then on Saturday, I will be doing an all-day workshop in Vancouver entitled 12 Practical Steps to Better Chart Readings. So for anyone who's up either in the Bellingham area or in the greater Vancouver area, you can go online. The link will be right there on the YouTube. And you can go to the Fraser Valley Astrological Guild and find out more information on my lecture Thursday night, June 8th, and all-day workshop on June 10th. Next, I will be doing my annual summer retreat at Brighton Bush Hot Springs. Looking out, some of you have been to a Brighton Bush event of mine. Brighton Bush Hot Springs is a magical place in the old-growth forest of Central Oregon, about an hour east of Salem, Oregon, which is about an hour south of Portland, Oregon. And this place is off the grid. There's no internet. There's no cell phone coverage. 3 meals a day. Magnificent old-growth forest. Hot tubs that are interspersed all around the property. And we will be spending 4 days, or actually three nights, and I guess a bit of 4 days, from July 30th to August 2nd. And the topic will be an initiation to the spiritual dimensions of astrology. An initiation to the spiritual dimensions of astrology. This will be a short version of the 9-day retreat I did a couple months ago in India, and it will be a lot of fun. You do not have to have a huge amount of astrology knowledge, whether you're a beginner, a student, or a professional. There will be something to be gained from this. It's a very, very magical place. And even if you don't come this summer for participating in this, go there for some reason. It's a gem of a place in the Northwest. And that will sell out. We're going to limit that at 25 people, and we're already halfway there. So if you're thinking about it, let me know or let them know. And you can find out more at Brighton Bush. That's BREITEN Bush, BrightonBush.com, and the link will be right there, I hope. Okay, so what a month. You know, I hate to say this, but this is the first time since last August when I'm not going to repeat the same words that I said at the front end of every monthly so far. And what I've said is, if you thought last month was crazy, wait till next month. Well, I think we're temporarily crazied out. There will be some interesting stuff this month, and the craziness factor will pick up again in July and August for damn sure. But I think we have a little bit of integration happening this month, and we'll get there in a moment. Before we do, I wanted to start off with a short poem that I wrote many, many years ago, and I shared this at a group that there was an astrology conference with that Kaipacha hosted. Kaipacha does the weekly Pele report on YouTube. Check him out. He's awesome. And there are several. How many people here were in Costa Rica? 1, 2, 3, 4 of us. It was a magnificent retreat. And I began one of my talks with this short poem and was encouraged to share it more, and so I'm going to tonight. It's called A Slice of Light. God said, "Let there be light." The word was said, the deed was done. Newton said, "Let light be known." And our minds were taught to put myth on the run. Then came a string of improvers, and some measured the speed of light from the sun. They picked apart all its component pieces, weighed them, played with them, and stayed with their fun till they took from the jumble of facts they had found one simple truth that lay bare on the ground. Dr. Einstein had said it, not just to be nice. He said, God does not play with dice. You see, things happen with reason from beyond the 5 senses, and scientists will never have all of the answers. The best searching minds in science and arts are finding great truths from mystical parts. They suggest that we each, in the darkest of night, still may hold on to our own slice of light. And astrology, to me, is basically a tool that enables us to visually see the slice of light that we each manifest through our lives. We are complex organic crystals. Just like you'd make sugar candy by melting sugar into water and then putting a seed crystal in, and then that crystal will grow by taking the components from the supersaturated solution. By the same token, we are complex, organic, animated, self-aware crystals that have grown in a sack of supersaturated fluids. We call it amniotic fluid, that the proteins are pulled in and made crystals. That's all we are, is complex crystalline structures that have gravitationally trapped light into matter. And astrology is one way to actually look at the shape of our slice of light. So, here we are at the cusp of June. Cusp is just Latin for edge. There are many things have cusps, and months have cusps. We are at the edge of June. It is May 31st, the last night, the ultimate evening of May. And we are here to talk about the astrology of June. And we have some interesting things to talk about. But I want to take a short look backward, because oftentimes astrologers make the mistake of only looking forward. Oftentimes, many other people make the mistake of only looking backwards. Marshall McLuhan called this driving with rear-view mirrorism. You know, we gauge where we're going in the future by looking in the rear-view mirror, assuming that the future will be a reflection of what we've been, what we've seen, what we've experienced, and it rarely is. But looking at patterns is the basis of astrology. And there's a pattern that was set up this past year. It was actually set up for the first time back around Christmas. The exact was Christmas Eve. And then the second point on this was the middle of May, May 18th. And the third and final point on this 3 phase, three-prong, if you will, attack of Saturn and Uranus will be on November 11th. And the reason why I want to bring this up is because even though this particular aspect, which was exact on Christmas Eve of 2016, and then it was exact on May 18th, and it's now because of retrograde motion, because the Earth is moving around inside these larger patterns, this pattern is repeating, and it is now easing off from its exactness mid-May, but it will finalize in the middle part of November coming 2017. And the reason why I want to talk about it is because it ain't over yet. And I talked about it a month ago. I talked about it on April 26th when we were talking about May. And sometimes the accuracy of astrology is frightening. I have an engineering friend who used to say, God, you can't make this shit up this good. And what I talked about last month was how Saturn, the planet of stability, structure, governance, Saturn, the dad. When dad comes home, you better have it done, so to speak, It's karma. It's you're going to get what you deserve. Saturn is the limit. You can't go beyond Saturn. And of course, that was true for thousands of years until we discovered Uranus, and overnight the discovery of Uranus kind of did this to our brains. Because overnight, Saturn wasn't the limit anymore. There was something else that doubled the real estate of the things that moved in our little solar neighborhood. And Uranus is the lightning that awakens us, that opens us up to the future. Uranus is the psychic wake-up call. The lightning strikes and tension is released and we awaken. Now, either of these planets operating without the other can be trouble. When Saturn becomes too Saturnine, the structure gains so much weight and heaviness that it collapses, it dies under its own weight. Businesses, anyone here who is an accountant knows that business has to grow in order to become vital or to be vital, but it also needs good accounting practices. And a company that is so bent on control and accounting practices becomes fearful of growth, and that company can collapse under its own weight. The flip side of this is that Uranus, which breaks through Saturn, it takes those crystalline structures and it shatters them in a moment, and it says the limit that we thought was the limit isn't the limit. And so Uranus breaks through those structures, but Uranus without any Saturn is like a runaway train. Uranus without any Saturn is like just out of control, engaging in anything and everything that's exciting. Now, I know because for the last 7-8 months, every time I mention the word Trump, I get email. Oh, I was hacked by Russians last month. I swear to God, I got someone who posted a comment on almost every one of 100 and some odd comments, and I eliminated them because they were mostly very offensive. And I went, because with YouTube, you can actually see what someone's YouTube channel is, and the person was posting from Russia. And all of his, the Russians are here. No slight against any Russians that may be here, because, well, we don't need to go there. But Donald Trump, no matter what side of any political spectrum you may be on, Donald Trump is a Uranian character, astrologically. He was born during a lunar eclipse, and eclipses have a Uranian kind of polarizing, hot, cold, unstable feel to them in general. They can be breakthroughs, but eclipses, in a way, are Uranian. So Donald Trump was born during an eclipse. He's a Gemini sun. However, his sun, when he was born, was lined up with, joined with the planet Uranus. Okay, the sun lines up with Uranus every year for a couple of days. But when someone is born with the sun lined up with Uranus, you can see the wildness, the electricity, the rebellion, the radicalness, the out-of-the-boxness, if that's a word, and if it's not, I don't care. The out-of-the-boxness of someone whose sun is lined up with Uranus because they don't give a shit about the rules. Because they're going, lightning is going to strike when it needs to strike, regardless of what's holding it back. Are you with me here? So Donald Trump is a major Uranian being. And what I said a month ago was that by mid-May, that one of the things that will work for us, hopefully, because astrologers never know. Astrologers pretend to know. You know, we tell good stories based upon what we think we know. But it's not mechanical, and anyone who says it is, any astrologer who looks at your chart and says, this is going to happen, get the hell out of there while you can, because he or she don't know shit. Because things don't happen mechanically. Another story. Let me come back to what's going on right now. So on May 18th, I saw that Saturn was going to trine Uranus. Saturn and Uranus are a bit opposite or different in how they work, because Saturn presents limits and Uranus basically blasts through the limits. And I said back in April that I was hoping or thinking that when Saturn trined Uranus, we might see some very sensible and real constraints around the Uranian part of Trump's expression, which is wild and not playing according to the rules. Now, I get there are many people who say that those rules shouldn't be played to, and I'm not falling into a political discussion here. I'm just talking astrology. However, on May 17th, unbeknownst to Donald Trump, the acting Attorney General, because Sessions had recused himself from being involved in investigation of the Russia situation because he was personally involved in it, the Assistant Attorney General, Acting Attorney General, appointed a special counsel to investigate this. Everyone who has any knowledge of the guy Robert Mueller, who was picked to be this investigator, acknowledges that this guy is not a guy to be trifled with, and that he is impeccably above any partisan politics, and that even the people who disagree with some of the things that he might have done, no one ever has disagreed with this guy's integrity. And this guy now is basically Saturn to Uranus. Do you understand what I'm saying here? It happened within 24 hours of the exact event. But we are not done with this event because it will continue to play through. This is not a quick fix. This is not a flashy media piece. It's a deep astrological truism for 2017 that Saturn in late Sagittarius, about 24, 26 degrees of Sagittarius, is harmonizing or trining with Uranus at 26 degrees of Aries. And so we're getting this sense of something of substance, of weight, of gravity, of authority is working in a harmonious trine. This is not just something to just stop or to, this is going to be real, that's going to bring in some constraints around the crazier parts of the Uranus piece. I don't want to beat this to death. I just want to talk about it because it ain't over. Because this energy of Saturn harmonizing with Uranus is now backed up to, on this first day, tomorrow, the first day of June, we have Saturn at 25 and a half degrees of Sagittarius, and Uranus at 27. So they're still within a degree and a half of each other. And Saturn is retrograding, and then Saturn will turn direct and it will catch back up with Uranus. And so we get the third prong of this later this year. And I would imagine that as we move closer to the early part of November, that we might see more finality or more stuff that comes to light around this specific trajectory of what began last fall, post-election, pre-inauguration, and will play all the way through. Are you with me on that? Yeah. It's a very powerful piece because we astrologers often look at what's going on today. I write daily horoscopes. I mean, I put on my blinders, and an aspect that happened yesterday or one that happens tomorrow is not in my range of what's going on today. But often the things that are going on are subtle and may be resonant to what went on yesterday or last month or even last year or what will be coming up in a year or so. And this trine between Uranus and Saturn is very significant. Now, kicking off this month, one of the things that makes this even more potent, let me just get rid of the lunar aspects here, aspect points, and let's go no moon. Okay, just clears this up a little bit. One of the things that's very significant is that Venus, remember Venus went retrograde in Aries, and now Venus is moving on into new territory. Over the last weeks, we had Mercury moving through Aries, lining up with Uranus. And that Mercury, because of its retrograde stuff, kind of touched Uranus, backed off, lined up with Uranus. And there was a lot of mental excitement and instability that if you actually went back and tracked the days and even tracked the news, there was a lot of things that came to light during this period of time. But right now we're getting another resonance on that as Venus is moving through the latter degrees of Aries, and Venus is actually harmonizing or trining Saturn and joining up with Uranus. Whenever you have a faster moving planet that makes aspects with two slower moving planets, in this case Saturn and Uranus, even if the aspect is done, is in history, even if it's done, the faster moving planet re-triggers. It's like listening to a piece of music and getting a reprise or getting the same theme floating back in later and later and later. And that's what we have right now with Uranus that is actually lining up with it trines Saturn on June 1st exactly and conjuncts Uranus on June 3rd. So we're in this mix. Venus is different than Mercury. This is less mental than it is visceral. Venus has this Mercury sends and receives information. And the symbol of Mercury, if you look over here, I say here, I mean there. And you see the symbol of Mercury, it has that kind of the two antenna. Mercury sends and receives data. Venus is the same symbol, but without the antenna. So Venus is how we, in a way, send and receive our values without words. And as Venus is harmonizing with Saturn and trining Uranus, we're getting a flavor of this respect and connection to Saturn, the old, the tradition, the authority, the following the rules, the loyalty. That's Venus trining Saturn. And yet at the same time, Venus is conjuncting Uranus, saying, holy shit, that's cool, that's where I want to go. And that may be totally out of the box, eccentric, erratic, different, because Uranus is the rebel planet. Uranus is the do-it-differently planet. Uranus is the great awaker, it's the upsetter. Uranus, Rick Tarnas, wrote a book called Prometheus, the Awakener, in which he actually suggests that what we call Uranus probably would be more mythologically correct to call Prometheus, who stole fire from the gods' technology and gave this futuristic thing to humans, which changed the game. And so as Venus over these days is reconnecting with that trine from the old Saturn, tradition Saturn, to the new Uranus, the radical and futuristic Uranus, it kind of gives us the ability to do that dance in our minds, to hold on to that which is important based on history, while also moving into spaces that are new and exciting. So this is one of the pieces of the opening of the month, and it certainly is Venusian. We also have a piece in here that has to do with Mars at 28 degrees of Gemini. And notice that the faster moving planets, Mercury, Venus, and Mars, are all moving toward the end of signs, which is really part of what June is going to be about, because the sun changes signs once a month. It moves into whatever the next sign is. Right now the sun has been in Gemini, and on around the 21st or 21st, we get the summer solstice, and the sun moves into the sign of Cancer. The cardinal signs, Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, are the first signs of new seasons. 4 seasons, 4 cardinal signs. The word cardinal comes etymologically from the word henge, like Stonehenge. Hinge. A hinge is an amazing piece of technology, kind of like invented by the Steve Jobs of his day 6,000 years ago, who figured out this amazing technology that allowed you to have a stone wall that opened, you could walk through it, and then that closed, and the stone wall maintains its structural integrity. And that's what hinges do. Hinges are initiations to new experiences, and so the cardinal signs are initiations to new seasons or new experiences, and we'll talk more about that in a moment as we talk about the sun and Mars actually also moving into the new season sign of Cancer. But coming back just to finish this thought, there's a bit of inherent instability up there, and of course as above, so below, so down here, because we have over the next few days, week, we have Mars, Venus, and Mercury all going to change signs. And so there's kind of this feeling of like we're on the edge. We're on the edge. We're waiting for something. Anyone here, a Tom Robbins fan? Jitterbug Perfume, Skinny Legs and All, Still Life with Woodpecker, another roadside attraction. Well, one of his lesser known but just as brilliant books is a book called Half Asleep in Frog Pajamas. And in this book, the image is that we're all waiting, or people who are paying attention are waiting for the mothership to return. And we're like frogs on lily pads, ready to jump. Something's happening, and we're ready to jump. But we're all like half asleep in frog pajamas. It's a great image. But that's what this month kind of is. This month we're moving into new territory. Not just the sun moving into Cancer, but we have Mars moving into Cancer on June 4th. That's the first planet that changes signs. Then we have Venus moving from Aries to Taurus on June 6th. The same day, Mercury moves from Taurus into Gemini on June 6th, and then followed by Mercury whizzing through Gemini and moving into Cancer the same day as the sun moves into Cancer on the summer solstice on June 21st. So we have a tremendous amount of movement. A bulk of the month we have Mercury moving through Gemini. Mercury's moving fast now. When Mercury moves fast, it only spends a couple weeks in a sign. It moves almost twice as fast as the sun. The sun moves roughly a degree a day. When Mercury is moving quickly, it moves almost 2 degrees a day. And it's moving through Gemini. This is Mercury's home sign. Mercury actually has 2 home signs, and this is also on the topic to talk a little bit about tonight, so I think I'll go there right now. Because we are in the time of year of Gemini, right? The sun is in Gemini. It moved into Gemini from steady, solid Taurus around May 20th, 21st, and it will be in Gemini until June 21st. We've had Mars moving through Gemini. Mars is not thrilled in Gemini to be there, but it's okay because Mars can move. It moves fast. It may not be it may not accomplish as much, but Gemini is a fast sign. It's busy. And so Gemini, every planet relates to a sign, and every sign relates to a planet in astrology. Some planets relate to 2 signs. What this means is that Mercury is the planet that relates to Gemini. But Mercury relates to Gemini when it's ahead of the sun, when it's a morning star. When Mercury is behind the sun sets and it's an evening star, it relates to Virgo. And I want to just spend a minute talking about Gemini versus Virgo because they're both mercurial. But they're very different Mercuries. Because Mercury ahead of the sun, Mercury rising, I should say, before the sun, Gemini is about data. It's information. It's connecting the dots. Gemini is noisy. We come to this time of year, and what began in Aries as the impulse of life, a seed germinating. In Taurus, that seed developed wood, stalk, twig, stability. There's a whole building, stable side of Taurus. And then as the sun moves into Gemini, or as the energy moves into Gemini, then what becomes most predominant are the leaves on the trees, the bugs in the air. Gemini is about all the noise. You know that saying, you can't see the forest for the trees? Well, there's a statement a little bit about the difference between the detailed specific information and the noise of all the information. And this is the difference between Mercury in Gemini versus Mercury in Virgo. And I really mean the difference between Gemini and Virgo. You see, Gemini is about data. It's information. Gemini doesn't give a crap whether the information is useful or not. It doesn't even care whether the information is true or not. It just wants data points. It wants data. It wants information. And so Gemini is the cocktail party, chitter-chatter, interactive noise, coming and going. It's AM radio. It's listening on the AM radio, listening to a song, getting bored, listening to something else, listening to your least favorite conservative, talk show radio until you get pissed off, and then you change it to something else. And it's that Gemini scans. It's that whole thing of reality is vibratory, and Gemini knows that wherever you're focused, that's reality. Don't like it? Change the station. This is very different than Virgo, because as Gemini is AM radio, Virgo is FM radio. All right, so the deal is that we listen to amplitude modulated radio, AM, very different than frequency modulated, which is very specific, FM radio. AM radio is noisy, sloppy bandwidth. It's like 1,300 kilohertz, whereas FM radio is 102.3. Most people, when they listen to FM radio, have a station. And they just camp out there because it's their hum, their frequency, whether it's a jazz or a classical or public radio or whatever it is. Most people, when they listen to FM radio, like a Virgo tunes everything else out and looks at exactly what is. Hold on a second. For some reason, I think that we might not be recording. Oh, we are. I had an everything retrograde for a moment. All right. So Virgo is about specificity. It's about detail. It's not about information. It's about the binary process of choosing what information is useful and what information is not. The symbol for Virgo is the maiden holding the wheat and separating the chaff from the actual grain. This is good, this is waste. This is good data. This is fake news, whatever. But it's that process of what's okay, what's not okay. Now, the reason why we're having this discussion is that we're in that time of year of being overwhelmed by the noise. Gemini. In fact, we've had Mars moving through Gemini, but Mars enters Cancer on June 4th. There's Mars at 0 degrees of Cancer on June 4th. When Mars moves into Cancer, Mars is ahead of the Sun. It's almost like we get a sense of early summer. It's like the new season is starting, but it's starting too soon because Mars is like it's like the early warning system for the Sun as it goes ahead into the next sign. But the weird thing is that the following day, Venus moves from Aries to Taurus, and Mercury moves from Taurus to Gemini. Can you see both of those changing signs? Come on, there we go. Now, in a way, it's like a relay race. Mars has said, I'm out of here, Gemini. This is too nutsy, too busy, too scattered for me. I'm going into Cancer where I can rest, where I can wait for the right stuff to come to me because Cancer is receptive, it's emotional, it's watery. Meanwhile, Mercury moving into Gemini is almost coming in like the mafia cleaner. He's coming in, this is mental. Mercury, as it hits Gemini on the 6th, and Mercury's moving fast, so Mercury moves from 0 degrees of Gemini on the 6th into Cancer on the first day of summer, the 21st. So we have about 2.5 weeks of Mercury in Gemini, and this is mentally overwhelming. If you try to do something with all the data that you send or receive. Mercury in Gemini is very at home, but it can also make an earth sign, especially Virgos, a bit crazy. Because Mercury in Gemini is basically just turning the volume up on all the data and basically increasing the amount of information coming through the data pipes so that we are overwhelmed with data. And so my sense is that as Mars moves into Cancer over the next few days by June 4th, and June 6th, when Mercury moves into Gemini, the Sun stays in Gemini all the way through the first day of summer, that by the first day of summer, by June 21st, we're going to be exhausted. It's like our heads are going to be full. Enough. I need recess. I need sleep. I need a rest. I need to be able to sit back and absorb what it is that I've taken in over this period of time. And this has already started. I mean, the amount of information overload that we've had since Mars moved into Gemini. Does anybody know that when Mars moved into Gemini? Gemini, do you know? No. All right. No one to bail me out. Huh? April. I think it was April. It's been a couple months. Anyhow, the point, though, is that a lot of June will be feeling this Gemini buzz factor. And if we try to ground the energy, we'll want to ground the energy. We desire to put our feet on the ground. Do you know why we want to ground the energy astrologically? What is it about this month that's going to make us really desire a bit of simplicity, a bit of solidity, a bit less noise? Venus in Taurus. Because the same day that Mercury leaves Taurus and moves into Gemini, Venus, which has been buzzing like crazy the first few days of June, that all these things we want. Oh, June's coming. I want to do this. I can do this. Let's do that. And all this stuff that's kind of exciting about that Venus lining up with Uranus. Granted, it also is picking up on the trine to Saturn. So there is a bit of self-monitoring going on. But when Venus moves into Taurus, and Venus moves into Taurus on the 6th, and it stays in Taurus all the way through July. And we can't talk about that because my contract requires me only to talk, I'm kidding, about the month at hand. But the point is that Venus is in Taurus all month. And Venus is what we like. Venus is what we're attracted to. And you know what? Venus likes being in Taurus like Mercury likes being in Gemini. Why? Because Taurus's key planet, or ruling planet in the ancient tradition, Taurus's key planet is Venus. Venus in Taurus is like, I'm home. Hello, honey, I'm home. Mercury in Gemini is home. And so we have both Mercury and Venus working unconsciously, easily well in their own homes for much of this month, which means that our heads are spinning and we're involved in information, data, social interactions, just movement. And yet there's a part of us that really just wants to take a nap. My now deceased buddy Jeff used to say, when the going gets tough, Taurus takes a nap. He actually used to say Taurus gets a sandwich. Some people say when the going gets tough, Taurus goes shopping. But these are all Venus things. And there's a bit of that simple simplicity. My editor would never let me get away with writing that, but I just said it. All right. So, that first week of June is a huge energetic shift. It really moves the energy around a lot. And by the way, I started to say here, and I'm just going to say this in passing, that as Mars moves from Gemini into Cancer, it also picks up on a square to Chiron. And this is exact on June 2nd, that we might feel a bit of this kind of what's wrong with our lives, where we don't get to move ahead, what some of the historic problems that we've had in our life looking back that may be getting in the way of what we're doing now. And I think that that's even compounded a bit by June 4th. The Sun in mid-Gemini is making a square to Neptune. Now, this brings up another piece of the month that is significant, another piece of the year that's significant, but this piece started last fall around Halloween, and it was exact again mid-May, past month, and will do its third and final piece on July 4th, which is not June, not this coming month, but the following month. But the deal is that the relationship between Jupiter and Neptune, between Jupiter in mid-Libra, now retrograding, and Neptune in mid-Pisces, this relationship is a relationship that traditional astrologers say is an invisible relationship. These two planets don't see each other. Ptolemy called it an inconjunct. They were not engaging with each other. We moderners would call this a quincunx. Quinc 5, unx 12. Quincunx 5/12. A quincunx is an aspect of annoyance, adjustment. It's an aspect of discomfort, of this isn't right. So what isn't right here? Because these two planets, which kind of moved into this position last fall, through June and through May, June, actually April, May, June, and July, are almost locked in this dance of, I can't see you. I know you're there. I can't see you. Quincunx. Here's a quick quincunx exercise. We've now walked into the realms of experiential astrology. I want everyone to raise their right hand and put their elbow at 90 degrees so that the palm of their hand is about the same height as your ear. Okay? Try not to smack the person to your right. All right. Now, I want you to wiggle the fingers of your right hand and move your hand back, 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 until you can no longer tell it's a hand, but you see something in your field of vision moving. You got it? All right, now make believe that the palm of your hand is connected to your ear by a steel I-beam. And now go to look at your hand while those fingers are moving. You see, you can't bring it into focus, but you can't make it go away either, because it's right at that point where it's annoyingly there, but you can't see it, but you can't not see it. Do you understand? Do you have that experience a little bit? That's what a quincunx is. You can't resolve it because you can't bring it into focus, and yet you can't make it go away. Two planets that are square 90 degrees, they can be a real pain in the butt, but you get to work with that energy and do something with it. Quincunxes are just annoying. So, what are the two planets involved in this quincunx? There's Jupiter, the planet of bigger, better, more. Jupiter, the expansive planet. Jupiter, Jove, jovial, happy, bountiful, big. Jupiter, the gaseous planet. That's the biggest planet in the entire solar system. Jupiter, which is like the cosmic magnifying lens that makes everything look bigger and better and more. It's in Libra. It's like relationships. The whole thing of me and you, the inner to the outer, this is being expanded all through the year while Jupiter is in Libra. Neptune, all right, so Jupiter is expansion, right? But if you take a balloon and blow it up, what happens when you keep blowing up a balloon? Why does it pop? Because it bumps into Saturn. No, I'm serious here. Now, I'm not being facetious. You see, Jupiter is inside the orbit of Saturn, and Jupiter is the planet of expansion, but it has to answer to the limit of Saturn. So things expand, but they can only expand so far until they meet the limit. Then they pop, they break, they fall apart, they whatever. Are you with me? So a balloon, which is a great Jupiter word, a balloon blows up until it pops because that's the limit. Neptune is Jupiter, escaped from Saturn. That's all Neptune is. Neptune is Jupiter's philosophy, but philosophy has to answer to the rationality of Saturn. Neptune is not philosophy. Neptune is your dreams. Why? They don't have to answer to shit. You have a dream, it's real. Neptune is imagination. Neptune is dreams. Neptune is illusions. Neptune is the magic of that which exists outside of the constraints of Saturn. But make no mistake, Neptune and Jupiter are the same energies, except when Neptune expands, it disperses like a gas to fill everything. There's no limit placed on Neptune. There's always a limit on Jupiter. So what happens when the planet of make it bigger, make it better, make it more meets the planet of there are no rules? Huh? Well, it can be. We get, and this is only one component of many, we get something that we call fake news. We get something that the ability to discern what's true and what's not true, and I don't care what side of the political spectrum you're on, it doesn't matter, because you still don't know what's true, even though you think you do. We do. I'm not separating myself from that. We all think that we have a handle on what we believe to be true. But belief is Neptune. Belief is Jupiter. Because that whole idea of making it true. And so we have this exact quincunx, and a quincunx, we all want to say quincunx, but it's quincunx. The thing about a quincunx is, and now we're coming back to the sun right now, the thing about a quincunx that makes them so annoying is that there are points that are square to one side of the quincunx and trine to the other. And here we have the sun on June 4th making a square to Neptune, and on June 3rd making a trine to Jupiter. So the sun in Gemini trining Jupiter and squaring Neptune, and this is buzzing that quincunx to a heightened degree. Now we're right now on the cusp of June here on May 31st. But I'm suggesting that over the next few days, we will see stuff hit the news that will be impossible to judge, even though we think we might know what is true and what is not true, because as the sun is saying to Jupiter, you see, everything I knew is real, it's true, it's expansive, it's great. At the same time, that sun is going to be squaring Neptune, and it's going to be delusional and confusing at the very same time, and that's both the magic and the pain in the buttness. There's another word, buttness. Pain in the buttness of the sun square Neptune. All right, let's move on. We got a lot of stuff shifting that first week of June, and we moved to June 9th, and the sun on June 9th is the sun forms another quincunx. The sun on June, how did we get to June 25th? Oh, we jumped a week at a time. Come back here. All right. So on June 9th, we have the sun making a quincunx to Pluto, which again is an annoyance here because we can't quite tell where the depth goes. Pluto is the kind of the perspective that takes us down deeper, further into the mysteries. But what's happening on that same day, on the 9th, is that Jupiter, which has been retrograde, turns direct. And herein comes another point of this month, June. On June 9th, Jupiter, which has been retrograde, turns direct. And Neptune, which has been direct, turns retrograde, and we're coming right back to this weird relationship between Jupiter, which wants to know the truth. Jupiter is it's that part when you pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. This is not about nationalism. This is about pledging to truth and justice and these Jupiterian concepts that are above a nation. That's Jupiter. You know, it's the moral righteousness of what's good and what's evil. And yet, Neptune doesn't give a crap. It's all illusion. You don't know. And so we have again another resonance of this quincunx between Jupiter and Neptune, while Jupiter, which has been direct, is turning direct, and Neptune, which has been direct, is turning retrograde. And this is why these two planets are kind of almost locked in step all month. This is an important part of the month. And when any planet comes through that degree of being trine or square to one, it will be trine or square to the other. And that's the annoyance. You see, if you have a planet trine one, you have two planets that are humming with each other. And you have a planet that's trine one, that's cool. And you have that same planet that's square the other, that's not cool. You know, and so it's like, wow, this is really working. Wow, this isn't working at all. At the same time. That's why a quincunx is annoying. And in fact, by June 13th, we have Mercury coming into that same position. We'll fast forward this in a moment. But we have the sun forming the trine to Jupiter and square to Neptune. And then just a couple weeks later, we have Mercury coming into that same position. And so we're getting this thing over and over and over again. What the hell is the truth? We don't know. Period. And in fact, the more you know, the less you really know. Because Jupiter is that idea that what I believe is true. I mean, and I'm saying this, of course, for only you, not for me, because what I believe is true. That's what we do in our heads. Are you with me here? All right. So We have another piece of the puzzle that comes into play this month also, and that is that starting with, let's go to on June 15th. We're here at June 8th. Oh, did we pass the lunation? Where the hell is the moon? Yeah. No, we did, because we have the full moon on June 9th, which we're right there, but we didn't really talk about it. So let's hit that full moon, and let's back this up a couple of hours. So we have that moon that's close enough. The actual full moon on June 9th occurs at 6:09 a.m. Pacific time. So that's 9:09 a.m. on June 9th Eastern time. And that's 2:09 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. So, or Greenwich, no, that would be British summertime. Anyhow, a full moon is a halfway point in the lunation or the lunar cycle. It's an emotional culmination. It's the beginning of the end. It's like the halfway point. This lunation, this Sagittarius full moon, Gemini is about the details of the information. It's every piece of data. It's all the data points. It's all the perspectives. It's all the noise. The moon in Sagittarius says, yes, but that's the truth out there. There's the sense of having somewhere to go, reaching out beyond. The problem with this particular full moon is that the full moon is lining up with Saturn, and this is setting up the tone for what happens just a few days later when the sun, moving 1 degree a day, will actually line up opposite Saturn. But it's set up in the full moon. And what does this mean? This means we run into a wall. And when I say we, it may be each of us individually, something at work or in a relationship or with our kids or with our parents. It may be on a governmental political thing where there's someone who's laid down the proverbial line in the sand, or you cross this line and you're dead meat and we're going to. But there's something that happens at this full moon between June 9th and June 15th, when the sun, let's get out of here by hours, back to days. By the 15th, when the sun moves opposite Saturn. And there's this sense of that which is Saturnian, authority, real, the limit, is basically set off in a tug of war with the sun and now even Mercury coming into the picture in Gemini. Basically, it's like the information is not supporting the authority, or the authority in some way is molding or taking the information to make its position. But the problem is that when we have a full moon conjunct Saturn, followed by the sun opposed Saturn, and that sun opposed Saturn is on June 15th, followed by a Mercury opposed Saturn on the 18th. Boom, 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 boom. There's the 18th, and there's Mercury opposed Saturn. All of these things, one after another, are basically saying that we've reached the end of the line. It can't go any further. Something has to shift, whether it's in our personal relationship or in our work schedule or in something that we've been not paying attention to, or our relationship with a kid, with a spouse, with a parent, or whether it's government's relationship with other countries, or whether it's the press's relationship with the government. You understand what I'm saying? So there's a larger issue going on here that we can expect to hit around that time. All right, let's see what else we need to make sure we cover. There's always more. I'm skipping a lot of stuff. Let's jump to so we talked about the Jupiter turning direct on the 9th, on the day of the full moon, and Neptune turning retrograde a week later on the 16th. We talked about the planets opposing Saturn and Mercury opposing Saturn on the 18th and running into that wall. We have a little bit of an easier flow on the 19th, 20th, but on the 21st, which is the first moment of spring, on the 21st, the sun, and let's back this up by a few hours. We'll do this an hour at a time, and there is the sun at 29:59 Gemini, and this is at 9:10 p.m. on June 20th, and by 10:10 p.m. on June 20th, the sun is in Cancer. Now, here's an interesting thing about the calendar, because this is set up for Pacific time. This is set up for Pacific time, but if we look at this from Eastern time, that means that the solstice isn't until June 21st, because it's just a half an hour after midnight. And again, for those of you who are here from Australia, and I should mention in passing that this last weekend, there was an annual conference that's here in Seattle every year, NORWAC, the Northwest Astrology Conference. And how many people here were at NORWAC? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. A nice group of you. But there are people here from South Africa, Southern Australia, England, London, and I heard someone even say that they were here from Ballard, but I don't believe that. Did you have problems with the authorities coming over the bridge? Did you have to have a passport? All right.
They don't know I'm here.
They do now. All right. Anyhow, where was I before then? Solstice. Oh, things happening on different days, because I was going to say, in Australia, it's already tomorrow. The international dateline thing is a strange thing when you're traveling or trying to schedule a client. Oh my God. I can't do this now, but I've had some very strange stories of getting a phone call at 4 a.m. With a client thinking that she had an appointment with me on the phone, and I thought she was in London and she was in Sydney. All right, so every year when the sun changes sign from Earth's point of view and moves into a cardinal sign, this is the beginning of a new season. When the sun moves into cardinal fire, Aries, that's the beginning of spring. When it moves into cardinal water, that's Cancer, that's the beginning of summer in the northern hemisphere. And for those of you who live on the other side of the equator, it's the beginning of winter. When the sun moves into Libra, for us in the north, that's autumn. And when it moves into Capricorn, for us in the north, that is the beginning of our winter. The cardinal signs represent the main crosses of the year that the ancients used to be able to track the Earth's movement around the sun. And we're not going to get into the astronomy of that. But if there's anyone here who is interested in that, they should definitely check out the work of wonderful Gemini Brett. And you are doing a thing on Friday night? At Ohm Culture in Green Lake in Seattle. Obviously, for those of you on the internet, you can catch him online. But Brett is a bit of a magician, and as he calls himself, a storyteller. When it comes to the astronomical grounding, or what do you call it if you're going off into the sky? You're not grounding, but you're orienting, ascending, because this idea of the cross quarters and the solstices and equinoxes, these are the marking points that the ancients tracked to be able to even understand that there was an annual cycle of the Earth around the sun. And in fact, on June 21st, the sun, from Earth's point of view, moves from Gemini into Cancer, and just a few hours later, it's followed by Mercury, which is actually moving faster than the sun, and Mercury catches up to the sun and moves ahead of the sun just a few hours later than that. Watch this. Boom, boom, boom. There it is right there. So we have Mercury forming a superior conjunction to the sun. What does that mean? Well, make believe the microphone is Earth. It goes around me. I'm the sun. All right. Mercury, meantime, is going around the sun in between the Earth and the sun. Mercury is going around. Now, when Mercury comes close to the Earth, it looks like it's going backwards. It's retrograde. So whenever Mercury comes between the Earth and the sun and conjuncts the sun, between the Earth and the sun, that's considered to be an inferior conjunction. Why? Because it's beneath or between the Earth and the sun. So whenever Mercury is retrograde, lined up with the sun, that's an inferior conjunction. However, when Mercury is now on the other side of the sun, that's a superior conjunction, and that's direct. You can look at any chart and see Mercury conjunct the sun and know whether it's inferior or superior by whether Mercury is retrograde or not. And the difference of these two energies is very profound. Because when Mercury is on the far side of the sun, well, when Mercury is lined up with the sun either way, we can't see it. But when it's on the far side of the sun, it's almost like our antennae are going beyond our consciousness and reaching out. What's interesting here is this happens on the first day of summer. And Cancer, the sign Cancer is the crab. All right, let's spend a moment. Okay, we're good. So the big energy of June is that the sun moves from Gemini into Cancer, as does Mars and as does Mercury. Gemini is all over the place. It's everywhere. It's every when. There's no discrimination. Gemini is, it's just this constant movement. It's a switchboard operator, just kind of, I know we don't have them anymore, but just kind of plugging in this to that. It's the person who's connecting the dots. All right. When the sun moves into Cancer, it's like the last thing you want to do is connect the dots. You just want to stay there and have the dots come to you. Here's the thing. Cancer is just Latin for crab. By the way, I recently learned, and we had this conversation earlier this evening, a few of us from the conference got together, and I shared this thing that I learned from a friend of mine who is a Latin scholar, and it never dawned on me that Gemini is plural. Latin for Gemini, plural, is twins. One twin is Geminus. Geminus is singular, Gemini is plural. So I love the fact that Gemini is a plural sign because there's multiple points of reality. It's multivalent. It connects wherever it is. But Cancer, which is just Latin for crab, the crab has a few very important things about it, and I'm a great fan of natural astrology, meaning you can learn more about the people around you and about what signs mean by studying the animal totems than you can out of reading all the books in the world. And the crab, first of all, the crab lives in the most dynamic, nutrient-rich place on the planet. We call it the intertidal zone. This is where crabs live. Every day the tide comes up, the tide goes out, the tide comes up, and the tide goes out. In other words, there's 4 separate rhythms every day. In, out, in, out. There's flow, ebb, ebb. So for the crab, there's no rest. You know that saying, there's no rest for the weary? Well, this is why Cancers need to rest, because there's no rest for the crab. Because things are always changing. Crabs live in the most dynamic place on the planet, and the crab lives in constant fear of having the water come up and down and it being in the wrong place, so it doesn't get the dryness that it needs on occasion where the food is right at the edge. Or it doesn't want to go so high and dry that when the next flow comes up, that it doesn't get carried back out into the water. It'll drown. What's the opposite of drown? It'll dehydrate. And so the crab is always watching the changing tides. And Cancerians, people with a Cancer sun or Mercury, Venus, or Mars, or ascendant, or moon, are always paying attention to the emotional rhythms, because they're afraid of getting caught at the wrong end of one and being left out or rejected or what's the word I'm looking for? When you're abandoned. Thank you, Neil. The crab basically lives in fear of being overwhelmed by changes, tidal changes it can't control. So what does it do? You see, the problem is that crabs don't have a backbone. They have an exoskeleton. But it's not enough to make them feel safe, so they go find an exoskeleton of a larger animal who's no longer living in their exoskeleton, and they crawl into a snail shell or a larger shell of some seafaring creature who's now left its body and has left behind its shell. And the crab will use that shell as its home. You see, our homes are just our shells. That's why crabs have home and family as an important piece. It's our place of protection. Inside our home and with our family, we're safe. Theoretically. But you see, the crab, that's still not enough. The crab's still freaked out. So it takes this larger shell and it drags it into a cave or under a rock because it doesn't want to get washed away. Okay, so this is one thing about a crab. Second thing about a crab is that because it has these large pinchers, it can't run very fast forward. If a crab is going to travel, it's going to move sideways or backwards. That's what crabs do. You know, and we humans who are crabs, you know, we might have a feeling that we want to talk to someone about, and we're kind of getting up the courage to tell someone, I really like you. And just as we're kind of getting close, something happens and it looks like that person is either distracted or like someone else or something. And all of a sudden what we do is we do this, like a crab. We're back into our shell. And the person says, were you going to say something? And you're, no. Like I kind of thought it looked like you were on the edge of saying something. No. That's how that crab pulls in. Because it pulls in, it reverses, it backs up much faster than it asserts or aggresses. In fact, a Cancer will aggress by waiting. Tunnel spider is a perfect Cancerian creature. They make a spider web that's like a cave, and they sit behind it and wait for something to come in. This is what crabs do. The third thing that's very important about a crab is that its pinchers, once a crab holds on to something that it wants, it doesn't let go. And in fact, you know that old saying about a kid reaching into a cookie jar and getting a handful of cookies and they can't get their hand out because it's not... Well, a crab will pull its arm out of its socket before it lets go of a food source that it has that it now can't get its hand or its you know. And key word for crab is tenacious. It's that holding on to the past, which is what emotions do. So we have this beginning, in June, even at the beginning of the month, which with Mars moving into Cancer, and as Mars moves into Cancer, Mars is assertive, Mars is aggressive, Mars is directive. So what happens when we get directive and assertive energy that is kind of pulled in? Good night, Nick. We get what we call passive-aggressive. And this is, Cancers don't get mad, they get even. You know, there's that, you know, that fuming furiousness around Cancer energy that often is held in because it's afraid of asserting or aggressing or losing control of the situation. Anyhow, so we have Mars moving through Cancer with Mercury and the Sun moving there on the 21st, and this changes the energy and certainly changes it for the rest of the month. And then we move toward the new moon just a couple days later. And let's go back here to a day at a time and watch that moon moving through Gemini. And then the moon moves into Cancer. Let's back that up so that we have a closer new moon. There we go. There's the new moon. The new moon in Cancer. The actual time on that will be 9:24 p.m. on June. Nope. The new moon will be on June 23rd, 7:30 p.m. Pacific, So that's 7, 8, 9, 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and it will be on June 24th, early in the morning, Greenwich Mean Time. So this new moon is a very powerful new moon because, number one, the new moon is conjuncting Mercury still, and it's in Cancer, so it has that energy of the seed being a nurturing seed. Cancer is fecund. It's the magic of what happens in the moist soil. It's not so much the germination as the bearing of fruit that happens this time of year, at least in the northern hemisphere in many places, that the humidity goes up in many places, not in Seattle, I know, but in many places the humidity goes up, and there's that sense of the nurturing that happens inside the womb. But the other piece here that's important is that we also have Mars now coming into a point where instead of it trining Jupiter and squaring Neptune, as the Sun and Mercury did earlier in the month, we now have Mars coming into squaring Jupiter and trining Neptune, which may be very exuberant and energetic, that Mars-Jupiter, but there's now a sense of where the dreams and the imagination are actually coming to fruition. There's a sense of that Mars working with, let's move this ahead a couple more days. It's actually even a little bit more than that, slower than I thought. Do I have it here? Yeah, Mars squares Jupiter on the 25th. And Mercury is caught up with it. Mercury comes in right behind that. So, we're moving here an hour at a time. That's the problem. All right. So here we have Mars coming in on the 25th. But look at that Mercury catching up with Mars. And so we have Mars, then Mercury, and then later on the Sun. That doesn't happen until July. But these planets, one by one, square Jupiter and trine Neptune, and we're now getting that same emphasis on that quincunx between Jupiter and Neptune, this inability to know what the is real. We can't quite grasp it, and yet now it's coming back again, and this will continue all the way through July 4th, I think, when the third and final Jupiter quincunx Neptune is exact. There it is right there. And by then the Sun will be there. So the whole end of June, we're picking up on this. What the hell is going on? I don't know. I've given up. I can't even figure it out anymore. I watch the news, I listen to the press release, I watch this, and then I watch Rachel Maddow, and I can't figure out what's going on. I've given up. And that's, I think, part of where this month leads. And again, I think it's important to understand that what I've been saying for months, if you think it's been crazy, well, you ain't seen anything yet, I think we've seen most of it for a while. I think that what happens now over the next month or two, and I think even leading into the total solar eclipse, which we'll begin talking about a little bit more in depth next month, and then certainly on for August, because that eclipse will hit south of here, through Central Oregon. And if you haven't made plans already to figure out where you're going to watch it, it may be too late, because Oregon is going to be overrun by people, huh? Jumping. Yeah, Oregon, Idaho, etc. Southern Idaho. But the thing here is that this eclipse that's coming is at the end of Leo. It's the last degrees of Leo, which is where Trump's ascendant and Mars is. Now, I think that because of that, we're seeing a lot of the setup, even if we go to the last eclipses and this last new moon, and I know I talked about this last month. We certainly talked a lot about this down in Costa Rica a couple of weeks ago. Has that really only been a couple of weeks? Jeez. Because this past new moon was actually at the halfway point between the two eclipses. It was square the nodal axis, in other words. And so we're at a point of what's happening now. We've gone through a turning point. I think there still can be more surprises, but I think that in some ways, I know that as soon as I say this, something's going to happen next month that's going to shock all of us. But I think that on some level, we're surprised out. And I think now we have this integration and the sense of what are we going to do with what we've learned? What are we going to do with what we're learning? And I don't care what part of any political spectrum you're on. It still ain't what we thought it was. And so it's where are we going to move with this? How are we going to integrate this? And how is this going to lead to the crazy events that will culminate in a solar eclipse that is touching the ascendant and Mars on a president who was born during an eclipse? And so I think that we're going to see some stuff unfolding, but I think that this month is making, certainly moving toward it. One last thing toward the end of the month, and that is that Mercury, by the end of the month, Mercury, which is ahead, let's back this up a little bit. We're off in July here. There we go. So what's going to happen is all these planets moving through Cancer, as they move toward the middle end of Cancer, they're going to oppose Pluto. And here we have Mercury going to be ahead of the pack, and Mercury opposes Pluto on June 29th. And then later on in July, Mars and the Sun will reach those same points. And so the other piece of this puzzle is that Jupiter, as it turns direct, will later on this summer square Pluto again. And eventually it will oppose Uranus, which is kind of really moved ahead of this square. But we're seeing these same resonant points again and again and again. And we're even getting it now with Jupiter moving through the middle of Libra that will, by the end of June, kind of be hit by Mercury. And then Mars, which will and then the Sun in July, which will square Jupiter, kind of pumping the energy up to another whole level of fevered pitch, and then opposing Pluto, which will kind of be the power struggle. And I think that we will see the height of this power struggle as we begin to approach the end of June and then start moving into July. In culmination, in summary, again, looking back, I think we've had a rock and roll first 6 months of this year. I think we have a lot still coming up, but I think that June in some ways is about integration, and there are landscape shifts. In other words, the fact that Mercury, Venus, Mars, and the Sun are all changing signs is interesting. That doesn't happen every month. And the fact that that is happening is telling me that we're all personally, socially, culturally, we're all moving into new territory. And we have to be open to that. And at the same time, it's confusing because of the ongoing Jupiter quincunx to Neptune. And yet there's another piece of this, and that even the forward-moving changes that we don't understand have a background of ultimately holding the energy in and being solid, and we may not see that until the third and final trine between stabilizing structural Saturn as it makes its third and final trine to Uranus in November. Thank you all for your attention, and thank you all out there in Cyberland. And it's wonderful to see